Hello there. So, I continue. I'm still very much in the experience which began yesterday at Breaking Convention. After the Creative Arts workshop, I was just hanging around waiting for the next workshop, and someone who I didn't know at all, but I'd seen, and we said hello to each other, that's all, nothing more, nothing less. He sat down, had a little conversation, just a minute or so, and he produced a very small bag from his bag, and he asked me if I would like to have a microdose. And the next thing I knew, I was licking my finger and dipping it into this little tiny plastic bag, and I suddenly found myself in communion with the Dartmoor mushrooms. Never experienced them before. You know the ones, the little ones, very common, very helpful medicine. So this has propelled me on a journey. And frankly, although it was a microdose, and this is now the following day, I'm still there. So I'm going to use the mindfold. It's very helpful to disconnect from the immediate environment and focus on what I want to share with you. So this is the way I'm going to do this one. It was within minutes that I became aware of the connection that was being made, and I felt that wonderful lightness, that euphoria, that little gentle lift. And it was a very wet day at Breaking Convention yesterday on the Friday. Lots of rain and wind, and I knew it was time, after I'd made the very first film that I made, which I very much enjoyed making, and I was really looking forward to making some contacts and some communications with people in the forum, which is where they have all the stalls set up, advertising all sorts of things and selling things. And I went down there, and there I see a woman, and she is offering ganja tea. And I'm not the sort of person that normally asks for things, so I was definitely being given a very subtle, gentle nudge here. So I did ask. A very small amount was provided for me for free, which is very kind. And I had a tiny little bit of a chocolate truffle which contained the lion's mane mushroom, which, as we know, is very good for neuroplasticity. I had a really great conversation, and it was time for lunch, to meet Jeannie at lunchtime. And the next thing I knew, I was in this room with hundreds of people all jammed together, all talking very loudly. Mostly I didn't have to queue up to get my lunch. I'd brought my own, a special beef soup, which I felt would be really appropriate to nourish myself after the experience I'd had the day before of eating something that was almost entirely indigestible. And after a little while, I began to realise how incredibly uncomfortable I was, because, let's face it, the thing about working with plants and fungi is that you need to be very aware of the set and the setting. So I got an opportunity to have, I wouldn't say it's the worst set and setting, but it certainly was a highly undesirable one from my perspective, surrounded by people. Autistic traits started to come on strong, and I'm sure that the spirits of the fungi actually helped to activate that, so I was more aware. And as soon as I finished my food, after engaging in some very perfunctory conversations, I was just so glad to get out of there. And I had intended to go to another arts workshop, however, the mushrooms gave a little nudge again, and I found myself looking at the program, and it was like, 'Ah, yes, hang on just a moment.' The next thing after lunch was opportunity to have a back-to-back triple presentation from 3 different people about Amanita muscaria, the fly agaric mushroom. And it was like, it doesn't matter what you want to do, you need to do it, you need to get in there. So I got in there before it started, got myself perfectly positioned right at the front. So a nice surface to put my big A4 notebook out so I could take notes easily and effortlessly. And we were introduced, and then we had the first speaker who was also hosting this particular section. He came up with lots of interesting information. Then we had the second one, an amazing Frenchwoman who had the great good fortune to go to Kamchatka, it'll be now a separate state in what used to be the Soviet Union, in the far, far, far east, actually, the nearest state to Alaska, that far east. And she told us about the people in this village, and she went there, she lived with them, and she got to experience the whole thing about the harvesting, the drying, the culture, the law, and she took us into the most incredibly exciting world. So the things I feel I especially want to share with you, these are the indigenous people in that part of the world who've got an unbroken tradition. And that's the other thing. One of the speakers did speak about evidence in the teeth of a woman's skull, which showed remnants of this particular mushroom, and it goes back 12,000 years. So we're talking about something really part of our human culture here. And I'm going to be completely, I'm not going to fix myself in one talk, I'm just going to mix it all together. So this particular mushroom is enjoyed and is part of people's life in places as far away as Central South America, the whole of Europe and the former Soviet Union, Asia, East Asia, and even down as far as North Africa, obviously England, Britain, Spain, places like that. So a huge spread. It seems to be an entire Northern Hemisphere location, this particular one. But it was the information she shared with us about the indigenous people, and it was the women that were holding the traditions, and it was primarily the women and the young girls that would go out doing the picking, but not exclusively. And what they did when they found them is they would stop, they would pause, and they would sing and they would dance, and they would express their delight and their enjoyment and their pleasure at having found what it is they're looking for. And this is something that's also came up. Generally speaking, when it comes to mushrooms, it's an active process. The mushrooms reveal themselves to people, and anyone who's gone out picking Liberty caps knows that you can go out to pick and find nothing, go out to pick and end up with black bin liners full. They choose whether or not to show themselves to you. So even as bright a mushroom as the Amanita, the fly agaric, which is red with the white little spots on, it's still a matter of they show themselves to you. So there's a celebration, both especially singing and dancing. And when they're picked, they like to burrow under the ground with their fingers and get the stalk and the cap off in one piece without breaking it. That feels very important in their particular cultural traditions. Later on, when it comes to drying them, it's the same thing. They hang them up over the wood burning stove, and again they don't separate them. They actually have an expression that to separate the stipe from the fruiting body on the top, the cap, it's actually rather like separating your legs from your body. They feel that passionate about it. And there are various different ways that they are able to be consumed, and the main method that they were using was drying them until they were very, very dry indeed. That seemed to be very important. So I learned a great deal from that, and then a little bit more is just coming up for me to share for you, which is that the third and last workshop, which was from an American woman, so obviously it's found in America as well. So basically the Northern Hemisphere and as far down as Algeria, that was the furthest south that they were found, according to what people are telling us, speaking on the stage. So when it comes to cannabis, the vast majority of people that work with the cannabis medicine, and let's face it, smoking is still the number one method, they use a process called decarboxylation. And people who use the cannabis in a culinary way, they also use decarboxylation. So what decarboxylation is, it's subjecting the substance to heat. And the very precise information we were given when it comes to the Amanita muscaria is 88 degrees centigrade for 3 hours. So you need a drying oven or a dehydrating device. It'll take it up to 88 degrees for 3 hours. Now, there are so many interesting things about the effects of this particular mushroom, the Amanita. Lots of use for medicinal, actually for physical things, the nervous system, sciatica, so many conditions were mentioned. What I have done is I took copious notes, as I always do at this convention, and I will add in the comments and the description all the technical information which I got that you might find useful if this is something you want to explore. There was one recorded death in 2022. It is very clear that there are alkaloids which are harmful in this mushroom, as well as alkaloids which are magical, beneficial and healing. So the decarboxylation process, which is heating, my personal experiences with a fellow shaman years ago, she simply fried the mushrooms up in oil for about half an hour. So get them to a simmering temperature and then just have them simmering in the open frying pan for half an hour. Very effective. But it's the heat causes the acids, the name which I can't remember, and it turns into a compound called muscarine. And muscarine is the active compound that people are aware of pharmacologically. So fly agaric, it's so much related to flying, and the way that this makes sense to us in our rational minds is to do with dreaming. Lots and lots of evidence to support the fact that if people work with this particular mushroom, great benefits through the dreaming, intensification of the dreaming, and other such things too. And the other thing I want to mention is if people have been working with other medicines such as humor, ayahuasca and other medicines, and in their experiences they were given specific instructions to go and seek out the Amanita muscaria. So this is another thing to realise. And indeed I was told many years ago by the cannabis medicine that there would come a time in the future when I would work with many different plant medicines, which became true. But at the time, and even 10 years later, it seemed like, well, that's not going to happen. Well, it did eventually. So these people heeded the call and then went off and had their experiences. So very significant for the dream life and very significant for connecting us to magic in all ways and all forms. And indeed there are practices, Wiccan practices, which also include this mushroom as part of combination spell compounds which are created with various different herbs. I can also mention that to you. So if ever you need to go within, I do recommend the Mindfold. So what's helpful about it is when you put it on, you are completely blacked out. There's no trace of light, and this foam means that you don't have any pressure on your eyeballs or your eyelashes. It's a really helpful way to work, and all I can tell you is it's called Mindfold. If you're interested, look it up. I've had Mindfolds available at the retreats for years. Very useful thing to have access to. And I'm going to throw this one in. I'm going to link us back to the creative arts. The very last thing I remember is Sean saying to me, if you had done meditation and something's come up, get out the art materials and work with art, because it's so helpful. So it's not something purely confined to therapeutic practices like having a healing session. It's not even confined to working with nature's medicine. It goes even further. Very useful to know. So I will add everything I can dig out from my notes to do with the subject of the how many to mascara, but I haven't completely finished. Because that's right, yeah, because in the night, that's right, so after all that, most of the mushrooms told me, you've got to go home. Now what I'd done is I'd done something which was very inappropriate working with that particular fungus, which was that I was hunched over a table with hundreds and hundreds of people all around me. I was at lunchtime too, furiously writing everything down, all the gems which I needed to capture to be able to share with people like yourselves. So it was like, go home, and so I did. And I've had all these roiling in my gut. There's nothing wrong with feeling the roiling in my gut, but the roiling in my gut was saying, go home, relax, get warm, because that was the other thing. The entire day was spent in a cold environment. There wasn't anywhere that was warm except for the disabled toilet. That was the only place I found where it's actually warm in the entire convention on that day, because it was a really cold, wet, miserable Friday, despite having had some amazing experiences. And then when I got home, I was just very kind to myself and gave myself the heat and what I needed. And in the night, I had some somewhat disturbing dreams. And then this morning, it's like the art therapy. So very much I've had a morning of integration, and I'm looking forward to next preparing for up to 8 hours of ecstatic dance. All the love to you.